Miss Danielle, it happened in 1976, and the only reason I would know that is after the event or encounter, whatever you call it, being the bicentennial in America, it was a really big deal. And I was with friends, and we had a lot of fireworks, so it was a real special moment. That's the only reason I would remember the year. And I was born in 68, so I was 8 at the time, and I had gone to this, they called it a dude ranch, but it wasn't a ranch. It wasn't like some big impressive, log cabin with tons of windows. We had a lot of fun, but it was a concrete wall. It was basically a big rectangle with windows, one side for the boys and one side for the girls. And I had been there 2 years before, and things were a lot different back in the 70s. Now, parents don't let their kids out of sight, but back in the 70s, yeah, you want my kid for a month? Please take him, we'll pay you. Which we did. And the first 2 years was fun. We rode horses and went on long trips and swam in the pool, did a lot of stuff like that, and walked through the woods. It was really nice. But what started this is, and I don't know, it's strange how you can remember so much from your childhood at certain moments. But I remember the owners of the Dude Ranch, they had a son who was about my age. And to start it off, he was talking about strange things happening around the ranch. And the sun was setting, and I can't remember particulars about what he was talking about. I know he said some strange things were happening. I think he mentioned the woods, and he was a little scared. And maybe it was just the talk that I was spooked, but I got a real bad case of the chills, and looking in the woods, I just got this really bad sinking feeling in my gut. I can't say why I had that feeling. I've never had that before, but when he was talking, for some reason it really unnerved me. And shortly after that, I can't remember how many days after I had spoke to him, is when the first event happened at the Dude Ranch. And as I said, one side was had bunk beds for the boys. The other side had bunk beds for the girls. And one night, one of the girls came into the boys' side, from what I remember, just yelling. And she said somebody was at the window. A big ugly face was at the window. And we all woke up and talked with her. And initially I thought, you know how kids are sometimes when you're excitable, and there was a lot to do, and it was an exciting time to be there. But I will always remember how white she was, and I know people have mentioned in the past, when people were really scared or someone had a very emotional experience or scary, they could get so white, and she was just deathly pale. And she said there was a big black face in the window looking at her, and my initial thought was a pervert or something like that. I'm only 8. I don't know why my mind went there, but it did. Strangely enough, we didn't go out that night and check. We calmed her down, talked to her for a while. I don't remember her giving any detail, just it was a real ugly black face. And I'm just explaining what she said. The next day, the morning, we did go out, and we went behind to the back of the building, and there weren't a lot of windows. There was a window above the boys' restroom and a window above the girls' restroom. It was high off the ground, and they didn't have any drapery or blinds or anything like that back then. It was just a window that could be opened, if I remember correctly. And we did go in back, and what I remember seeing was, at first, the height of the window. Now, granted, I'm only 8, so everything to an 8-year-old is much taller. But the window seemed to be pretty high. I don't know how much you can trust a 47-year-old memory, but I would think 8 foot high, I'm guessing. It just seemed really high, and I remember as a kid thinking, unless someone had a stepping stool or a ladder, you couldn't see into the window. That was my thought at the moment. And we did notice a muddy handprint. It had we had some rain. I don't know if it rained that night that she saw the face, but we did have some rain, and I saw a handprint next to the window, and the handprint looked a little odd to me. It seemed quite large, and it seemed like the thumb was not where you would put a human thumb. It was like a cross between a human and a chimp. The handprint did seem quite large, and we did see a number of muddy ridges, like where something or someone put its hand and it slid down the concrete. And I can't remember it was big bricks of concrete. There's a term or name for it, and it escapes me now. But I remember seeing the handprint and seeing some muddy slides. It's like where if someone had been looking and their hand just slid down. And that's all I remember that happened afterward when she told us what had happened. I think it was only a day or two later, we decided to go on a fairly long, I guess you'd call it a horseback expedition. And I remember it was 2 days out, 2 days back. We had plenty of food. I do remember my butt hurting on the saddle. Nothing like being in a saddle for over 8 hours a day. If you're not used to it, your butt really hurts. But I remember that morning, what was strange is, and they had a corral directly behind the building, and they had a number of horses, and it was a pretty big corral. And that morning, the horses had all jumped out. I don't know if you've had a lot of experience around horses, but it just seemed odd to me that they had all jumped fence, and that isn't typical of horses, especially ones that are broken in and fully domesticated. To me, something had to have happened that every single horse, jumped the corral. And we had to go look around in the woodland and track them all down. And that took quite a few hours. And I know they were upset. And I want to say they said, yeah, it keeps happening with some regularity. I think it drove them nuts because they're like, we don't know what's going on. This shouldn't be happening. They didn't equate it to anything, really strange. It was just one of those odd occurrences is how I took the owners, to take it. But we did get the horses back, and we did saddle them. We had to put the blanket and saddle down on our own. And the saddle was Western, and we tied it off Western. And it's kind of funny, you learned real quick that when you're putting a saddle on the horse, they tend to hold their breath. And I remember a couple times I didn't have the saddle cinchings on tight enough, and as you're galloping, your saddle slides off, and before you know it, you're basically riding bareback. So you learn kind of quick that at least the horses I experienced, you really had to kind of put your knee into their chest, not in a mean way, but you kind of had to thump it to get them to exhale and get that strapping on tight. And we went out, and I don't know if this was on I don't remember if this was night 1 or night 2 when it happened, but it was in the middle of the night. We did have a fire going. It was embers when I woke up, and it was in the middle of the night, and it was a real clear moonlit night. I want to say a full moon, but I can't be certain after so much time had passed. If it wasn't a full moon, I'd say it was close to a full moon, and there were lots of stars out, so there was a lot of ambient light. And I just happened to wake up, and it's like for some reason I knew where I wanted to turn. And I've always been a very light sleeper. And I woke up, stood up, and I looked. There was 2 gently rolling hills in what we call a holler in the South, or at least in the Midwest. It's the low point in the land between 2 hills. And I saw what I thought at first was someone walking down the hill toward us. And my first thought was, I caught ya, because what the counselors love to do, the teens that were in charge of us, at least with the boys, they love to scare the hell out of us, and they were really good at it. So I remember waking up, and I just immediately I knew where to turn, and I saw this figure, and I'm like, caught ya, you're not going to get one over on us or on me. And when I got up and looked at it, and it was, I'd say probably about 60 feet. Initially, that was the only thing I could think of, as it was a counselor that was going to try to, scare the heck out of us. And what I first noticed that clued me in, it wasn't a person were the long arms. And that really threw me because the arms were much longer than a normal human. And then I'm looking at it and I can't see the face, but I can make out a great profile. I can see the whole body clearly. And then I notice hair all over it. And, I'm like, the arms are, and then I started getting a little scared. Because I'm like, these arms are way too long and there's hair all over it. And that's when I realized it wasn't a human I was looking at. And then the most eerie thing is, as we were staring at each other, it kind of moved its shoulders forward a little bit, and it started swaying from side to side. It had its long arms in front of it, and it was just swaying. And I thought, who does that? I've never seen anybody do that, in my life. Only 8, but never seen anybody with extremely long arms, a hairy body, and swaying like that. And those 3 things got me, and I didn't have any experience with Bigfoot being in 76. I didn't even know about the Patterson-Gimlin footage. The only thing I knew, and I don't even know if this was out before then or after that, but the $6 Million Man, Steve Austin, Bionic Man, they had a show with Bigfoot. And the only other thing was Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer with Yukon Pete and the Yeti. That's the only thing I watched. It wasn't, it just wasn't, I don't even want to say it wasn't as big. It wasn't even really known. I think there was a popularity in it, obviously, but where I lived in Omaha, Nebraska, it was just not even on my radar. It would, no one ever talked about it. And that's the only experience I had. So I'm watching this thing, and it's just swaying from side to side with these really long arms. And the body, it looked like it wasn't built. It wasn't the massive thing most people describe. I'd say it was fairly lanky. From what I can recall, the torso seemed to be a bit longer than it should have been. And to me, if I had to describe it, it was like a chimp, but with a more human body put with it. The arms were really long. It went down nearly to its knees, and I remember that because before it started swaying, I remember that because it was just so odd. And then when it kind of thrust its shoulders out forward and started swaying, you could attribute the arm length to the knees being a little bent. But from what I remember, the first thing I noticed was the arm length, and I'm like, this isn't right. And I don't know how long we stared at each other. It felt like 1 to 3 minutes. It did seem to be some time. And what's strange is I was, God, the emotions that were going through me. It was definitely alarm. It wasn't fear. I'd say it was alarm and just awestruck in what I was seeing. And after, I'm guessing 1 to 3 minutes, it just continued down the holler. And at the bottom, in the holler, there was a tremendous amount of brush, a lot of overgrowth. And it just walked down to the bottom of the holler and turned away from us, and that was it. I do remember being rooted to the spot. I couldn't move if I wanted to, and I'm sure it was several minutes after it had walked off and I couldn't even see it to where I could even move. I was able to breathe, but I was just rooted to the spot. And the strange thing is there were probably a dozen people or more around me, and all I had to do was yell out or speak up, but I couldn't. It's like I was incapable of saying or doing anything. I couldn't vocalize or anything. I was just awestruck by what I was encountering. And it walked off, and after several minutes, I laid back down. I don't know if I got any sleep or very little sleep, but when I woke up, I didn't say a word. I thought, well, all I'll do is give the other guys ammo to razz me, and I didn't want that. I just don't need a lot of BS from getting razzed after something like that. and I never said anything. Later that day, and I don't know what to attribute this to, later that day we were on the horses and we were traveling up a hill, and off to my right I saw a real old, looked like the remains of a real small home, but it was a rundown shack. I couldn't tell you when it was built. They had rebuilt a western town close by, and I wish I could remember where in Nebraska this took place. I remember the drive out to the Dude Ranch was, at least in my estimation, was pretty far. It took a long time to get out there. And to this day, I wish I could, remember. I've tried to find remake of western towns in Nebraska, and I haven't seen anything that reminded me of what I experienced, because they had the saloon built, and it was for kids. You could order ice cream and sodas and stuff like that. It was like an old western saloon, and that was probably about 3 miles from the Dude Ranch. So I've even looked for dude ranches, but of course, over 40 years ago, and this was, pre-internet, pre any really decent computer era, there's nothing on file that I found or online. But we were going up a hill, and to the right, there was a shack. Part of the roof had fallen, and it was really dilapidated. Calling this thing a shack is probably giving it the benefit of the doubt. And maybe it was just because I was unnerved about what happened the night before. But to me, what it looked like is the interior of the house. Part of the roof had fallen down, but part of it was still intact. And you could see through a window. There was no glass and no cross section where the windows would go. But honest to God, what it looked like to me were like 3 white furry figures with their back to me, and they were side by side, and it looked like they were eating. It's like you would see people eating a meal. And I just remember they were close enough to the window where the sunlight was getting in. And again, I'm like, that is really strange, and I can't say if that was a real event or not, but it seemed just as real as when I had encountered this thing. Shortly after that, for some reason, my horse bolted, and it just took off. Oh gosh, and I couldn't get control of it for over a mile. It wound up stopping right by a thorn tree, and it threw me in the thorn tree, and the thorns were like 2 inches long, so bonus, I didn't get my eyes gouged out from this thorn tree, which is always a good thing. And I think it was the next morning, we turned around and came back, and from what I can remember, for the rest of the time there, because I think we were there for like 3 weeks, maybe 4. We were at the Dude Ranch for quite a few weeks. I want to say 3 or 4. But what's really strange is when we came back, I had, for some reason, I had quickly forgot about the whole thing, which is really bizarre for me, because to have such a defining life moment and to basically have it kind of erased from your memory, because the rest of the time I was there, I don't remember being scared about going in the woods. There were no other reports of any strangeness, no more ugly or scary black faces in the bathroom window. Nothing else happened. So it's really strange that happened. And, my parents came, picked me up. Life goes on as it does. Spent many years in Missouri, and went deer hunting, fished, and the woods never bothered me. And it wasn't until many years later that the memories came back, and it's really kind of embarrassing how it happened. My girlfriend at the time and me went to Sedona, Arizona, to a bed and breakfast. And Sedona is probably one of the most beautiful places I've seen on the planet. If you look at photos or videos, there's a red rock, and it's just real pretty. We were at, what was the name of the creek? That's strange, I can't remember the name of the creek, but the bed and breakfast had a number of switchbacks. They had a long staircase going down, and right by the gravel, they had a hammock that could fit 2 people. And we were down there for the weekend, had to be back to work at Monday. And, we were together for quite a while, like not real long, but 10 years, 12 years. And I must have been about 30 at the time, I'm guessing. And it was nighttime. It was another real clear summer night, perfect weather, stars were out, moon was out. You could hear the water going by the creek, which was very relaxing. I always loved that. And for some reason, at the worst time, I have a beautiful woman in a hammock, and we're staying in a bed and breakfast. And I was thinking, this is going to be a great weekend, And it went from that to where I just had a massive panic attack. I was like, something horrible is going to happen. And I told her, we got to get inside now. And I don't know what, after so many years, what brought that recollection back, why it was at that particular moment. I've wondered that, and I have no idea. But I just remember the worst feeling of anxiety I've ever had, and it felt like we were going to die. So we left, and again, there were quite a few switchbacks on the stairs because it was a fairly steep hill to get to the double hammock in the creek. And that was like the longest time of my life, was going back and forth on those stairs, getting to our room. And we got to the room, and it just kind of came out, and I told her, I think the mind is a very strange thing, and I had just told her what had happened when I was 8, and I was fumbling, I was so apologetic, I was so embarrassed, and luckily she was really understanding. And to this day, I just have no idea why I would repress that memory for so long, completely, utterly, and to have it all come back in the space of a few seconds. And after that, I would say for a number of years, every day I would wonder about what I saw, and I would try to explain it away. And I honestly can't tell anyone, did I have a nightmare? Was it a nightmare, a daydream? I'm not sure when the Beast of Boggy Creek came out, but I thought, well, is it possible I saw that and this caused me to have a false experience? I was always trying to cling on to something that would explain what I saw and what happened. And once the recollection came back, I would think about it so many times per day. And it's really strange because I could immediately go back to the moment when we were camping, back in 1976. I just woke up and I stood up, and for some reason I knew where to look, and I saw this thing. And I would replay that. Oh God. I could have driven myself nuts how many times I thought of it. And now that so many years have passed, I don't think about it every day or multiple times a day, but I'd say I still do think about it every other day, maybe once or twice a day. And what's another bizarre thing is, after the memories came flooding back, I started to research online about it, because up until that moment, I had no interest in Bigfoot, cryptids, supernatural. I wasn't into ghosts or anything like that. And I started researching, and I do know roughly the timeline, because that was when, I believe, roughly when Sasquatch Chronicles started his cast. And I can't remember the name of the group he used to be with, but it was the old one where it would go 5, 4, through 1. It was the earlier episodes, and I remember watching that for a number of years, and then I would research the topic, listen to episodes. Luckily, it didn't consume my life to where I lost work or lost jobs because of it. I was able to focus on what was important, but I just really, had this undying interest in the subject, and that lasted up until now. I'd say lately I don't watch as much. I watch a lot more stuff on British history, Roman history, or I listen to a lot of music and read. I'm probably the most boring person on the planet, but at least I listen to Queen as I'm reading, so I got some measure taste. But just thinking back, it was so odd that such a monumental event that I know happened, but that I would try to debunk it in my own mind. And what is really weird is we lived a number of years in Phoenix, Arizona, and now we live in a small town in Georgia to be near my parents. And what's really bizarre is things started happening around this house. And I told my son, well, it's got to be like not a ghost, but like a poltergeist or something. It's just having fun. But he said something would slap, and it was almost always his room, but something would slap his wall really hard or tap at his window. And he's got a pretty active imagination. So I hate to say I discounted it, but it wasn't until I heard the slap on the house. And it wasn't coming from his room, it was coming from the back of the house. And this house has tons of windows. And the back of the house is our washer and dryer room and storage room. And first time I heard that, I had the biggest sinking feeling. I was like, oh God, please let it be anything but that. And I thought, maybe it was someone. And there were a couple times this would happen. I'm always a very light sleeper. And like right now, I'll usually wake up around 2 or 3. I'll be up for half an hour, then go back to bed. But I've always been a person where if there's the smallest noise, I wake up and I'm immediately awake. Just at the only superpower I have. And a couple times I did hear what sounded like fingerprints tapping at the window. And I was like, oh God, please. And it worried me enough where I called the cops out twice. And before this, if I took you outside, we're surrounded by woods. And one day, and again, it was a really nice summer day, I could have saw what I swore looked like 2 hairy black legs. Not real tall. And it was going through the brush, but there was a clearing to where I could see the legs, and I was just staring at it. And I really got the feeling it stopped. And I really got the impression that whatever it was like, oh hell, it sees me. And it took off in the opposite direction. It was going from left to right, and it ran back to the left. And I remember it was so bloody fast. It was like going from 0 to 60 within a second. And I did call the police out twice because I thought, maybe we have an intruder for some reason, which would be a really bad move. In Georgia, we're in the deep South, and the gun culture is really big here. Everyone has guns, and I think the quickest way if you wanted to unalive yourself would be go to someone's property around 2 or 3 a.m. and start making some noise. People aren't going to come out and question. They will shoot first and ask questions later. And the first cop came out, and I didn't call him out when I saw the legs. I called him, it was number of nights later when it was the slapping on the house. And I called him and I relayed, I saw someone in a ghillie suit, which is like what a hunter would use or snipers use to conceal themselves and look like vegetation or part of the brush. Because I didn't want him to think I was a nutcase. I'm not even going to go there. And it was a night, and he looked around and he asked me a little bit about more detail, and I kind of hum-hawed, and he said, well, you need to get some game cams. I didn't even bring up the subject of Bigfoot. This is a small town, and I would be a laughing stock. And trust me, news gets around out here within 30 seconds. Literally, if it's juicy, it doesn't take long. And he said that, and that happened for a while, and it was real alarming. And my thought is, it's a juvenile. That was my thinking. I could be wrong, but luckily it's been some time. It's been, I want to say, a month and a half and 2 months, and it was happening fairly frequently. And there were a couple times I would wake up, and for some reason I'm a sofa sleeper. I always sleep on the sofa for some reason, and I would wake up feeling an impact, and what it literally felt like were 2 real heavy legs running really fast in the yard. But it was so heavy you could feel the impact as they hit the ground. And that happened a number of times, but thank God it stopped. So I always wonder, do we have a juvenile? I did some research, and I haven't seen anything in my town or anything nearby in a long time. Supposedly there was a disappearance of a worker. I don't know what they were doing, but they were 3 or 4 people were walking, doing a job. I can't remember how close it was to town, but one of the guys just disappeared. And they had rounded a corner walking down this road to do some work. And when their coworker didn't show up, they went back around the curve and he was gone. They never found him, as far as what I could find out on the internet. And at the time I was like, God, please don't let it be this. And the windows, our dog was rather excitable and would get the zoomies all the time. And we don't have many visitors. So anytime someone did visit, he would annihilate the blinds. So I still haven't replaced the blinds yet. So I just have open windows, and I always thought, God, I hope I never look at a window and see a black ugly face, or a white ugly face, or a brown ugly. That terrified me. Now we've been here 5 years, maybe a little bit longer. Now I'm used to it, and since this stopped probably a month and a half or 2 months ago, thank God it died down, and we haven't had anything else happen. But yeah, I still think of that moment from time to time, and everything seems really odd as to why such a huge event could be forgotten about so quickly and for so long, and not just forgotten about, but utterly repressed until there's some sort of triggering factor. And I still don't know what the trigger was. It was a summer night full of stars, the moon was out, but I was with a beautiful woman, my girlfriend, and I had no reason to have the reaction that I did, but it just came flooding back like the floodgates were open, and which brings me up till now. And I still wonder about what did I see, because if there's an expert out there, I'm the furthest thing from it. You know, I'm an armchair historian in general, which I'll admit to, but these things I have no idea. I can't even tell you what I saw. I can't tell you I saw a Bigfoot, because I don't know what a Bigfoot is. All I know is when I was 8, something happened that I can't explain that has stayed with me till this day, that I had forgotten about for 20 years, or maybe 22 years, roughly. I've come to peace with it more now, so I don't, it doesn't upset me anymore or make me scared or worried. And I've come to peace that I've tried to stop debunking myself. From my own view, I consider an event that happened. I can't explain it, and that's where I'm at. I do remember in the morning after seeing the thing, I saddled a horse and I went to the holler where all this overbrush was. And all I could think of is, how could anyone or anything move through such thick brush without making a noise? Because it was really thick. And some of the brush in the Midwest and the South, you talk about overgrowth and being out in the bush, it can be so thick in places you literally can't move through it. You would literally need a machete to cut your way through. And the roots and the thorns and the briars, it's just an unholy mess. I do remember thinking, how could anyone or anything move through this and not make any noise? But when it walked off, I didn't hear any impact from footfall. It was summer, so there was no leaf brush to crunch on, and it was silent, just going down the hill, and then it turned away and disappeared. So I think I'm in a good spot now. I've come to terms with it. At least in my mind, I feel like I saw something that shouldn't exist.